Gurudev. Brahmanandam Paramasukhadam Kevalam Jnanamurtim Dvandvatitam Gagana Sadrisham Tattvamasyadilaksham Ekam Nityam Vimalamachalam Sarvadhi Sakshi Bhutam Bhavatitam Trigunarahitam Sadgurum Tam Namami Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Loka Shankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badaraya Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha Sadashivasamarabham Shankaracharya Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Parampara Vande Guru Parampara Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryankaravavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai Om Shanti 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 Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Chaiva Tato Jayamudirayet. So we did verse 17 yesterday. Karmano hyapi bodhavyam, bodhavyam cha vikarmanah, akarmanascha bodhavyam, gahana karmano gatihi. That is, action enjoined by the scriptures is also to be known. Forbidden action and actionlessness must also be known. This is because the nature of karma is difficult to understand. I will read this before we go to verse 18 because it will be important for us, I think, to understand this. Here, Krishna first divides karma, meaning action in general, into two types. Action that is to be done, karma, and action that is not to be done, vikarma. What is to be done must of course be known, and what is not to be done must also be known. Furthermore, if you think that actionlessness, akarma, is not doing karma, then akarma also has to be known. You must know what is meant by not doing karma. Is it the non-performance of action, or is it the absence of doership? This you have to know. If akarma is the absence of doership, then the non-performance of a given action does not amount to akarma, as Krishna himself would clarify later. Why is all this analysis needed? Because one should not take karma in a simplistic way, nor is it easy to understand. People sometimes tell me, just give me a second, no? 1 minute. I'll just be. So people sometimes tell me, Swamiji, I have heard enough about karma. I want jnana. If karma were known by these people, they would have the knowledge jnana too. Karma has to be known, but it is difficult to know. Gahana. The simple do's and don'ts are not what is to be known. What must be known is the very nature of karma itself. Gahana means that the subject matter of karma and akarma is shrouded in confusion. Because you do not see it clearly, you need to clear away the mist. And to do this, you have to bring in light. Karma is not as simple as you think. If you understand the nature of karma, you will understand reality, Brahman, everything being connected as it is. To say that karma is to be known is to say that everything else connected with it has to be known also. Thus, Krishna introduces the subject matter of karma and akarma in this verse and the preceding one. The answer to the question, what is karma and what is akarma, is given in the next verse, along with some words in praise of the person who understands action and actionlessness clearly. Karmanyah karmayah paschet akarmaniccha karmayah sabuddhiman manusyeshu sayuktah kritsna karmakrit. Yaha, the one who, karmani, in action, akarma, actionlessness, paschet, would see, cha, and, yaha, the one who, akarmani, in actionlessness, karma, action, paschet, would see, saha, that person, manushyeshu, among human beings, buddhiman, wise, saha, that person, yuktaha, is a yogi, kritsna karma krita, who has done everything that is to be done. Yaha karmani akarma paschet cha yaha akarmani karma paschet saha manusyeshu buddhiman saha yuktaha kritsna karma krita. The one who sees actionlessness in action and action in actionlessness is wise among human beings. That person is a yogi who has done everything that is to be done. Shankara writes an extensive commentary, Bhashya, on this verse, setting out the various arguments that are relevant to this important topic. In order to gain a clear understanding of karma and akarma, we will look into this particular Bhashya in some detail. It was said that even the informed are deluded with reference to the nature of action and inaction. Karma here means action in general and is not restricted to scripturally enjoined rituals as it is elsewhere in the Gita. Because even the learned are confused, Krishna says he would reveal to Arjuna the nature of karma, which implies akarma also, knowing which he would be liberated from doubt, from samsara. What is to be done and what is not to be done are both considered to be karma, action. Killing, for example, and helping someone are two different actions. Killing is a prohibited action, nishiddha karma, and helping another person is an enjoined action, vihita karma. A command, vidhi, is always with reference to an action, either to do it or not to do it. Because one may hurt another, the Shruti enjoins us not to hurt anyone. May one not drink alcohol and may one not eat meat are also scripturally injunctions or don'ts with reference to the actions one performs. Similarly, there are a number of commands concerning the do's, the actions that are to be done. Thus, there is a list of do's and don'ts for people to follow, all of which are karma. Akarma is also to be understood in terms of karma. Is akarma simply not doing action, or is it something more? The very nature of action, its swarupa, is what we are trying to understand here. Only when action is properly understood can one understand what non-action or the absence of action is. People generally understand the absence of action as not doing action. If you do not do something, this non-performance is the absence of action. When a man who is walking stops walking, the action of walking has stopped. There is a standstill, no action. But standing still is also an action. Try standing still and you will understand how difficult an action it is. Similarly, sitting still is an action, which is why you cannot do it for very long. To think that you are going to gain inaction by sitting still is to be deluded. There is no such inaction in fact. To think that not performing action is inaction is no different than thinking that printing more currency will resolve a country's tight money situation. Such a simplistic approach cannot solve the problem and will create additional problems because it is not that easy. Similarly, to understand inaction is not as easy as it seems. What Krishna says in this verse is in keeping with what he had said earlier in the second, third, and fourth chapters. Although the present verse is very cryptic, it can be understood by keeping in mind what has gone before. Another description of a wise person. Here Krishna describes a person who could see inaction in action and action in inaction. What kind of a person is this? If he or she sees a man walking, does the person see him as standing still? And if he is standing still, does the person see him as walking? This is like watching someone eating and having the person tell you he or she is not eating at all. Usually we would think that such a person was mentally deranged in some way. But here, Krishna says that one who sees action in inaction and inaction in action is a wise person, buddhiman. Then, to top off the confusion, Krishna goes on to say that such a person is a Krishna karma krita, someone who has done everything that is to be done. This means that there is nothing more for this person to do. He or she is free, whereas for others, there remains a long list of to be dones and not to be dones. This list, as long as it exists, is unending because the items to be done and not to be done are difficult to fulfill. What you ought to do is not always possible to do, nor can you always avoid doing or saying what is not to be done or said. Also, the to be dones and not to be dones go on increasing. With reference to the food one eats or personal ambitions, for example, there are a number of things to be done and not to be done. Like this, everyone has a long list, and even if some of the items are fulfilled, so many others pop up in their place. Some items on the list are very clear to you, while others may be vague. Still, they are there below the surface and will become clearer in time, like a Polaroid film. This then is the situation for everyone. Here, Krishna describes the person who has managed to fulfill all the items on the list as being one able to see action in inaction and inaction in action. He praises such a person and refers to him or her as being wise, buddhiman. If seeing is all that one has to do to be wise, the seeing itself must be very difficult. The words themselves reveal the difficulty. How can I see action in inaction and inaction in action? Inaction in action. The usual locative case meaning for the word in the expressions inaction, inaction, and action in inaction does not apply here. When we say, where is he sitting? The response, on the ground, denotes a location, whereas the action of sitting is taken place. Just 1 second. I'm going to read this again. The usual locative case meaning for the word in the expressions inaction, in action, and action in inaction does not apply here. When we say, where is he sitting? The response on the ground denotes a location where the action of sitting is taking place. Similarly is the case with the statement, the book is in my hand. However, here Shankara dismisses any sense of location with reference to action and inaction, saying that action cannot become the location or the basis for inaction. Inaction being the absence of action, it is not there to be located upon action. Inaction does not exist. We cannot say that a non-existent inaction sits upon action, just as we cannot talk about the horns that sit on our heads. Horns do not exist for us, and what does not exist cannot be said to be sitting anywhere. Similarly, we cannot say that the son of a woman who never gave birth to a child, Vandhya Putra, is sitting on the ground because there is no such person. In the same way, inaction, being the absence of action, does not exist for it to have any location. Therefore, action cannot be the basis for inaction. Nor can that which does not exist in action be the basis for action. Therefore, the use of the locative case here is not to be taken in its usual sense. Rather, it means with reference to. With reference to action, this person is able to see inaction, and with reference to inaction, he or she can see action. In the absence of action, karma abhava, the wise see action, and in the so-called action, they see no action at all. When you perform an action, there is the notion, I perform an action, aham karomi. What is involved in this I perform an action? What is this action that you are doing? When you say, I am talking or I am walking, the talking and the walking are actions centered on what? This then is the question. When you say, I walk, your legs and feet are involved in the action of walking. The mind is also involved, there having been a decision, a sankalpa, to perform the action of walking. Without a sankalpa, you do not perform a deliberate action. There is always a thought, a desire involved. So, in the action of walking, the mind is involved, the legs and feet are involved, and even the eyes are involved. And when you say, I perform an action, aham karomi, I, aham, is also involved. In this process, the mind, senses, and the physical body are all involved. The physical body is called karya in Sanskrit, meaning product, and the mind and senses are called karana, meaning instrument. This assemblage of karya and karana is involved in the action that belongs to me. That is why I say, I perform this action. The I is also implied in action. I meaning Atma. The results of action belong to the doer. And why do I perform this action? I perform an action for a certain result. And when the result comes, to whom does it go? Whom does it affect? It comes to me, the one who is the karta, the doer. Therefore, as the doer, I am the enjoyer. I perform this action for the sake of getting the desired result. Karma phala bhogaya aham idam karomi. In this way, we see that action involves the karya karana sanghata, the physical body mind sense complex, and also aham, I, the Atma. When I say I am the doer, I am the enjoyer, etc., on whom is the doership and enjoyership centered? It is centered on myself. The question then that arises then is the I, the Atma, a doer or a non-doer, a karta or an akarta? If Atma is a karta, then I definitely perform action karma, which produces a result for me. This is real karma, binding karma. No action is possible without there being an agent, doer of the action, a karta. For example, when we say Rama goes, Ramaha gachati, the going is done by Rama, the agent of the action of going. And although action is dependent on its agent, the agent is not dependent on action. This means that the agent, the doer, has a choice in terms of action. He or she can perform an action, need not perform the action, or can perform the action differently. This independent doer, the karta, who enjoys such freedom in terms of action, is what is reflected by the first or nominative case in Sanskrit, prathama karaka. There are a number of factors other than agency that are also connected to action. Whatever is connected to an action, because of which the action is made possible, is called karaka. There are 6 kinds of karakas. The agent of the action being the first or prathama karaka, as we saw above. Then there is the object of an action. When Rama goes, Ramaha gachati, where does he go? He goes to the forest, vanam gachati. Forest being the object of the action of Rama's going. Thus, we have a doer and an object of doing, karta and karma, referred to grammatically as the nominative and accusative, first and second cases. Then, how does Rama go to the forest? Does he go on foot or does he go in a chariot? What is the means of his going? The means by which he goes on foot is the third karaka or instrumental case. And why does he go? What is the purpose of his going? Rama went to the forest to fulfill the words of his father, Pitra Vakya Paripalanaya, giving us the fourth karaka or dative case. From where does he go? From which place? From the city of Ayodhya. Ayodhya Nagarat, he went to the forest. This gives us the fifth karaka or ablative case, since it is also connected to the verb, the action of going. The final karaka is the locative case, as in Rama lived in the forest. Ramaha vane avasat. Here forest is in the seventh case expressing location. Not doing karma also requires a doer. So before we go here, just to sum up what we read, because there was a lot of new concepts, One is the Karya Karana Sanghata. Karya is the doer, the agent of action. That is the
body.
The body, right? And the mind, senses, and the body mind sense complex. The mind is called the Karana. The mind and the senses is called the Karana. So this total complex, the body mind sense complex, is called the Karya Karana Sanghata. And then you have 6 Karakas. This is very, very nicely given in Sanskrit grammar. Those of us who've learned Sanskrit grammar will understand. When we do the cases, different cases, Rama, 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 He Rama, He. That is the singular, plural, and singular, dual, and plural. We do all the 6, in fact, 7 Karakas. The 7th one is He Rama, which is you're addressing Rama. But otherwise, there are 6 Karakas.
Vibhakti.
Vibhaktis, yes. So, Ramaha Ramam, Ramena Ramaya Ramat, Ramabhyam, Ramebhyah, Ramasya Ramayoho, Ramanam. So there are 6, 7 Karakas actually. But here, for all practical purposes, they've removed the 7th one, which is that where you address Rama. So, having learned that, now not doing karma also requires a doer. Returning now to the first Karaka, the Karta.
No, the Karta, no, excuse me.
Yeah.
Karaka. Karaka is the object, no?
Karaka is not the object.
No.
Karaka is
the destination. That's what I mean.
Sorry.
Karaka.
Karya, Karana, sorry. Karana is the instrument. Karaka is the object. You're right.
Object, that's correct.
Karaka is the object, yeah. Returning now to the first Karaka, the Karta. Just a second, let me just get this. See, there are a number of factors other than agency that are also connected to action. Before that, yeah, and whatever is connected to an action, because of which the action is made possible, is called Karaka. So Karaka is not just the object. There are the different factors that are connected to an action, because of which the action is made possible, is called Karaka. So Prathama Karaka is the agent of action. That is the first one. That is Ramaha is the Prathama Karaka. Then there is the object of an action. When Rama goes, Rama Gachati, where does he go? He goes to the forest. The object of the action is the second Karaka, like that. So Karaka is all the agencies, all the factors that are involved in the performance of an action. That is Karaka. And object, subject are all parts of that.
Very good. I think we should learn this with the grammar, then we'll understand it.
Yeah.
Really, as you pointed, wonderful.
So,
really, really good.
Returning now to the first Karaka, the Karta, Shankara says that whether you say, I did this action or I did not do this action, the I, the Ahankara is involved. Both the doing, Pravritti, and the not doing, Nivritti, are centered on Ahankara, the Karta. Therefore, if I am the Karta, I am the Karta in both action as well as inaction. But if I'm not the Karta, then there is no action at all for me, because all action depends upon the Karta. If I am someone who is not an actor, then I perform no action. Na kinchit karma karomi. The I is always free from action. It does not do any action. Atma neither does an action nor impels or prompts anything to act. Na karoti, na karayati.
So beautiful. Really beautiful.
So it is all centered on the I, the ahankara. So either doing pravritti, either doing or not doing, either pravritti or nivritti are all centered on the ahankara, the karta. Therefore, if I am the karta in both action as well as inaction. But if I am not the karta, then there is no action at all for me because all action depends upon the karta. So the I is always free from action. It does not do any action. Atma neither does an action nor impels or prompts anything to act. Na karoti, na karayati. Mistaking action for inaction and inaction for action. If Atma is neither of these, neither a simple karta nor a karayita, one who causes action to be done, how can there be any karma? And if there is no karma, why does Krishna simply not say so? Why does he talk about seeing inaction in action? Karmani akarmayah paschet. The problem here, Shankara says, is that we superimpose kartritva on the Atma, which is really akarta, and say, I do this action or that action, when really the action belongs to the karya karana sanghata. To illustrate this problem, Shankara gives an example that everyone can relate to. When you are in a boat moving in a river, you see the trees on the river's bank moving in the opposite direction. Even though you are moving in one direction, the trees seem to be moving in the other, and you seem to be constant. What does this mean? The trees are not really moving at all. They are not performing any action. But in these trees that are really standing still, you see an action. Akarmani karma darshanam. This kind of seeing is called viparita darshana, erroneous sight. Secondly, as long as there is this notion, I am the karta, merely not doing any action does not make one an akarta. Therefore, whenever one says, I'm sitting quietly, I'm not doing any action, aham tushnim asam na kinchit karomi, this person considers himself to be a karta. Therefore, he is doing the action of not doing any action. To illustrate this, Shankara gives the following example. Suppose you are standing on the river bank and looking at the boat, which is moving away from you. Having reached a certain distance, the boat seems not to be moving at all. To you, it appears stationary. Thus, an object can also appear to be constant when it is actually moving very fast. An example of this, one not available to Shankara in his time, is a movie on a screen. Although it is a movie, a succession of rapidly moving frames, things like trees, mountains, and so on appear to us to be stationary. Here then, you see inaction in action. Karmani akarma darshana. Thus, in the world, we see karma in akarma and akarma in karma. Similarly, with reference to karma and akarma.
That is, akarma in karma is that boat is moving, but it is standstill. Looking, you see, karma in akarma. So good.
Karma in akarma is when you are moving in a train the trees are stand still, but you see the karma in you see that the trees are moving. That is karma and akarma. Whereas akarma and karma is like uh,
The boat.
the movie, the movie screen. I think we can relate more to the movie.
Yeah, okay.
The second example that Shankara gives is when you're standing on the bank and you're seeing a
Yeah.
boat move. After a certain distance, the boat seems as if it stands still, although it is moving. Just like even in the movie screen, there is a rapid succession of images that are going in order to create that movie. So there is a lot of karma actually happening. There is movement of the screens, of the images. But for us, when we see the mountain, the river, the mountain as standstill. So that is akarma and karma. Similarly, with reference to karma and akarma themselves, there is viparita darshana, seeing what is not there. Darshana means sight, seeing, and viparita means other than what is. The self does not perform any action, and therefore there is no action. The action you see is really inaction. In other words, there is no action in action because Atma is a karta. Knowing this, the wise person performs action, but at the same time knows he does not perform it at all. Doing, the person does not do. Kurvan na karoti. Seeing, the person does not see. Pashyan na pashyati. Hearing, the person does not hear. Shrunvan na shrunoti. Just give me a second. 1 second. So I'm actually on call today. I might get a call anytime from now. So I'm just wondering if any of you can take on in case I have to leave. Okay. Yeah, so we'll go on till I get a call. So Pashyan na pashyati. That is the person seeing, the person does not see. Hearing, the person does not hear. Shrinvan na shrunoti. Similarly, smelling, one does not smell. Tasting, one does not taste. Walking, one does not walk. Talking, one does not talk. Thinking, one does not think. Even being confused, the person is not confused. A wise person can be confused in that his or her mind can become confused with reference to a particular thing. For example, there may be confusion about the direction to be taken in order to reach a certain place. Thus, being confused, the person is not confused, does not mean that the wise do not get confused. What does all this mean? For the wise, the I, the Atma, in the statement, I am confused, remains untouched by any action because it does not perform any action. If a man is acting, we say he is acting. And if he is not, we say he is keeping quiet. But is there really a time when he is not doing action? Keeping quiet simply means the person does not have a job and he may not even keep quiet. He may talk a lot, eat a lot, hang around a lot, and at the same time, he says he's keeping quiet. Therefore, not doing anything is definitely an action. And for that action, there is an agent, a doer, a karta. Because people think they do action, they also think they do not do action. This is because both the action, pravritti, and the non-action, nivritti, are attributed to Atma instead of to the karta, which is superimposed, aropita, upon the Atma. Let me read this again. Therefore, not doing anything is definitely an action, and for that action, there is an agent, a doer, a karta. Because people think they do action, they also think they do not do action. This is because both the action, pravritti, and the non-action, nivritti, are attributed to Atma instead of to the karta, which is superimposed, aropita, upon the Atma. In this way, Atma is taken to be the karta, and the doing or not doing of an action which is centered on that karta is mistakenly attributed to Atma.
Means karta is suppose an eye. I am seeing, okay? Eye is seeing. That is the karta. But we feel Atma is seeing. That we superimpose that seeing on that Atma, which is not doing it.
Yeah.
So
True. Action is dependent upon Atma. At the same time, no action is totally independent of Atma. And in Atma, there is no action whatsoever. Because people do not know this, they are under the spell of delusion, ignorance, seeing action in inaction and inaction in action. One who is able to see Atma as Akarta never performs any action, even when he does an action karma. Such a person will see akarma in karma because he knows that Atma does not perform any action whatsoever. The nature of Atma. The nature of Atma, the self, is in the form of pure consciousness. The very word self implies that which does not need to be revealed to you, the self, by anything else. You require no means of knowledge, no pramana to prove your existence. That which requires no pramana, no means of knowledge, that which is self-evident is the self, Atma. And what is its nature? It is in the form of pure consciousness, knowledge as such. Because Atma is unqualified knowledge, there can be particular knowledge which is nothing but consciousness plus some qualification that appears in the form of knowledge of this or that. Knowledge as such must be there before it can be qualified. For example, for there to be pot knowledge, ghata jnana, cloth knowledge, pata jnana, man knowledge, purusha jnana, or women knowledge, stri jnana, there must be knowledge as such, unqualified by anything. This unqualified knowledge is the nature of the Atma. Knowledge as such gets seemingly qualified in the form of thought, vritti. With vritti, knowledge seems to be qualified, and without vritti, it is unqualified. This unqualified knowledge is consciousness, the nature of Atma that performs no action. Why do we say that Atma performs no action? One reason is that action implies motion or some change. Try to think of an action without motion, without change. Any motion, any change from one condition to another, from one form to another is action. Even a chemical reaction is an action. But can we say that Atma, whose nature is consciousness, is subject to action? Consciousness is not subject to motion because, being all pervasive, it is not located at one point for it to move to another point. Consciousness does not move within itself either, nor does it have any part to undergo any change. Consciousness not being an assemblage of things. Only that which is put together can undergo change. Things that are put together will naturally fall apart without anything being done. It is their nature to fall apart, which is also an action. Even a car that is kept unused for 25 years will undergo some change, and a Rolls Royce is no exception. Whether the car is running or not running, it is subject to change, simply because it was put together. Samha Tattvat. Samha Tattvat. There is always entropy for things that are put together. Let me just check the actual meaning of entropy. Entropy is, I think, change, but let me just confirm. Entropy is a thermodynamic quantity representing the unavailability of a system's thermal energy for conversion into mechanical work, often interpreted as the degree of disorder or randomness in the system. The second law of thermodynamics says that entropy always increases with time. The second meaning is lack of order or predictability, gradual decline into disorder. A marketplace where entropy reigns supreme. So basically, it is lack of order or predictability, gradual decline into disorder. So that the example of the car being kept unused also undergoes change. So there is a decline in the order. It is getting...
It's given in the following paragraph.
It is given in the following paragraph.
Yeah, footnote is there. Entropy.
Okay. It is there, is it? Let me just check. Yeah, inevitable and steady deterioration of a system or society. That is the meaning of entropy given here. Thank you, Savitaji. So where did we go? So even there is always entropy for things that are put together. A good way to understand entropy is to leave your room as it is for some time without doing anything about it. Just live in it. Don't sweep the floor. Don't clean. Don't put anything back in its own place. What will you have? Entropy. Anything that is put together tends to dissipate, to fall into disorder. This movement from order to disorder is entropy, which is also action. Only the self is not subject to this entropy. Consciousness, the nature of I, the self, does not tend towards disorder because there is no order, Atma, not being made up of parts. Only when there is creation is there an order and therefore disorder. Atma is one whole, limitless in nature. Atma being not limited in any way, what can it do? It cannot go anywhere because it is not limited place-wise. It cannot change or modify itself into anything. It cannot grow into something or dissolve into something. No action is possible for Atma. there is not even sankalpa, decision in Atma, nor is there any kind of thought, which is also action.
Unborn it is. It is unborn. Means
Yeah.
it is not uh, kept assembled. That is what they
It is
meant
not
it.
put
No?
together, basically. It has
Put
no
together.
part. It is not put
That's
together.
what, so good.
That is
Good.
Satya. Om Tat Sat. That is which is always there. Existence. So
Aja.
Jaha.
Okay, good.
To say I remain quiet means that there are certain other times when I'm not able to be quiet. Consciousness does not say this because consciousness is always quiet, nirvikalpa, and undergoes no modification, vikalpa whatsoever. Because there is nothing that is separate from consciousness, vikalpa is not possible. There is no such thing as the self going into something or reaching out to the world. It has already reached out to the infinite. It is one whole, free from all limitation, in the form of pure, simple consciousness. Atma performs no action, nor does it prompt something else to perform action. And in its presence alone, all activities take place. The doer is I, but I is not the doer. When there is an action in the mind, senses, or body, there is the presence of Atma, the Karta being nothing but Atma. Atma is not the Karta, but when the Karta is there, Atma is there. I am not the Karta is a fact that is not known. I know myself only as the Karta. I am the seer, the hearer, the thinker, the doubter, and the walker. I know that I am the doer of all these actions, but I do not know that I am Akarta, a non-doer. Not knowing that I am Akarta, the Karta naturally becomes I for me, and I becomes the Karta. In fact, the Karta is I, but I is not the Karta. The problem occurs when the Karta is I, and I also is the Karta. This happens when the I is not known. So, a person who knows the self sees inaction in action and action in inaction, which is other than that what we generally understand by akarma and karma. Because doership, kartritva is there, akarma is reduced to karma. There being a karta and agent for akarma also. The person who says, I do not do any action, is not doing action because there is doership and the person takes himself or herself to be a doer of no action. As long as the karta is there, karma is also there for the person, be it pravritti or nivritti, action or inaction. Both belong to the karta alone. So just going back here, I just wanted to say this beautiful sentence. The doer is I, but I is not the doer. So for a wise person, but I do not know that I am akarta, no. Not knowing that I am akarta, the karta naturally becomes I for me, and I becomes the karta. What I wanted
think it would have been better if they would have put small I and big I, you know.
See, for the wise person,
Both is same. Okay, I know that. But Jiva and big I, if you then this sentence reading will be good.
yeah.
Not
See, without the Atma, there is no action. Therefore, for a wise person, he knows that there is The I is because of the Atma, but he sees himself as the non-doer because he has the he has the non-doership. But whereas for an unwise person, an ajnani, he sees I as the doer and I as the karta as well. In fact, the karta is I, but I is not the karta. So that is what is the wise person's thing. The karta is I, but I is not the karta for a wise person. But for an unwise and ajnani, the I is karta, I is also. The problem occurs when the karta is I and I also is the karta. This is what happens when the I is not known. So the wise person functions from the space of Atma. So he sees everything is just happening. He is not doing, he's not seeing, he's not hearing, he's not. So he is just the pure consciousness that is seeing that the karya karana sanghata is actually functioning. The one who sees things as they are has wisdom. If the person knows I am not the karta, he sees akarma in both karma and the so-called akarma. And this person, the one who sees Atma, the self, as one that is free from kartritva, doership, he alone sees, says Krishna. Therefore, the person is called Buddhiman. The literal meaning of Buddhiman is one who has an intellect, Buddhi. Just as Dehavan refers to one who has a physical body, Deha. But everyone has a Buddhi. Why then does Krishna call this person a Buddhiman? Buddhi has to be understood here as wisdom in the form of self-knowledge. Thus, the one who has Buddhi has the knowledge of the self and is therefore wise, Buddhiman. Wisdom is seeing things as they are. One who sees things as they are in terms of reality has wisdom and is therefore wise. Wisdom does not mean that the person has generated a new line of thinking. Here, Krishna refers to a person who is able to see karma and akarma as they really are as a buddhiman, a wise person among human beings. Saha buddhiman manushyeshu. Krishna also calls this person a yogi, saha yuktaha, meaning that he or she has lived a life of yoga which has paid off in terms of wisdom. Yoga being meant for gaining this knowledge. Such a person living a life of karma yoga has gained what it had to offer him. He is a real karma yogi, an accomplished yogi. Understanding what is to be understood, he or she is a person of fulfillment. Kritsna karma krita. Samsara is centered on
Here
doership.
this Buddhiman means the Viveki.
Yeah,
the
Jnani.
Jnani, Viveki, who knows who he is. Actually, that is Viveka, permanent and impermanent.
Samsara is centered on doership. To know oneself as akarta is to know oneself as abhokta, one who is not an enjoyer. If you are not the enjoyer of the results of any action, then there is no punya or papa for you. And when there is no punya or papa, there is no sukha or dukkha, meaning that you are above sukha and dukkha. Sukha and dukkha being the net result of karma phala are also karma phala, the result of action. You may have performed a certain karma and received some money. Because of that money, you have a big house and are very comfortable. Because of all this, you are very happy. Being comfortable, being happy is a karma phala for you. Dukkha is also a karma phala. The house you bought turned out to be in a bad neighborhood. You were happy with the house until it was broken into and you were robbed. No matter how many new alarm systems you install, the results are the same: frequent robberies and vandalism. So the same house that made you sukhi for some time has now made you dukhi, unhappy. Either way, it is all karma phala, punya and papa. You asked for it and you got it. Because all unseen results, punya and papa, fructify in the form of sukha and dukkha, all karmas are capable of producing sukha and dukkha for the karta. As long as I take myself to be the karta, I am subject to sukha and dukkha. To be subject to sukha and dukkha is what is called samsara. Sukha and dukkha themselves are not samsara. The notion that I am subject to them is samsara and makes me a samsari. Samsara is a notion. That the physical body is subject to pain is a fact. But if I say that I am subject to pain, there is samsara. I am subject to pain is different from the physical body is subject to pain. If you say the body is subject to pain, it is a simple truth because it states a fact about the empirical world. The creation is like that. The body endowed with the sensation of pain as a means of protection. Otherwise, one would not pay attention to it. Pain indicates that something is wrong and needs attending to. Therefore, physical pain is an important part of the creation. That the body is subject to pain is true. That I am subject to pain is an opinion, a notion called samsara. It is not true because Atma is not the enjoyer of the results of action. Karma phala bhokta. Atma is not the enjoyer because it is not the karta, the doer. One who knows that he or she is not the enjoyer is called kritsna karma krit here. When one is able to recognize oneself as free from doership, he or she becomes free from enjoyership also. Being free from enjoyership means that the punya and papa standing in one's account are all taken care of. Such a person who is free from a sense of doership and enjoyership is called a kritsna karma krita. For him, everything that has to be done now or later has been done. No new incarnation has to be taken by the person. No karma remains to prompt another birth. In this life also, whatever the person thought he or she would do is gone because the person is Ananda, Purna, fullness itself. He or she is above Sukha and Dukkha, liberated from the subjugation of karma, and therefore Kritsna Karma Krita. Inaction is not the absence of action. One who is Kritsna Karma Krit sees very clearly that there is no action whatsoever in action. Karmani akarma darshanam, and that there is action in inaction. Akarmani karma darshanam. In his understanding, inaction, akarma, the so-called absence of action, is converted into action because of the presence of the karta. The one who says, I perform this action, is the same one who says, I do not perform this action. To say, I do not perform this action does not mean there is no action because this particular inactivity is dependent upon or is centered on the karta, the doer. Kartritva is the notion that I am the doer, aham karta. Because this notion is there, the person says, I do not perform this action now, which does not mean that he or she does not perform any action at all. While the person may not perform certain actions, he or she continues to perform some action or the other. No one can remain, even for a moment, second, performing no action whatsoever, as we saw in the 3rd chapter. Therefore, it is impossible for anyone to say, I am not doing any action. The footnote is, Nahi kaschit kshanamapi jatu tishtatya karmakrit. The 5th verse of the 3rd chapter. Even making such a statement is acting, because speaking is an action. A person who says, I perform no action at all, I am keeping quiet, is performing the action of speaking. There is no such thing as inaction in the sense of a total absence of activity. When Krishna says that the wise person is able to see action in inaction, he means that the person does not see inaction as an absence of action. When the person is able to see inaction is freedom from action, not the absence of action. This is getting a bit, I don't know about you, but it's confusing for me. What the person is able to see in action is freedom from action, not the absence of action. In the absence of action, there is action. And even in that action, the wise person called Buddhiman is able to see a freedom from action. So basically, he's seeing the Atma as separate from the Karya Karana Sanghata. That is the freedom from action. The Buddhiman has a wisdom, the Buddhi, that enables him or her to see inaction in action, because the person sees the Atma as Akarta. Thus, there is the recognition of the fact that the self is not an actor in any way whatsoever. The self does not perform any action, and in its presence, all activities take place.
That is witnessing.
Correct. I'm going to read this also. The original sin is ignorance. I think it's going on. It's actually a pretty big verse. Maybe I will read another para and then we'll do Manana on this. The original sin is ignorance. The problem here is that all actions are centered on the karta, the actor. Only when the karta is there is the possibility of action. Therefore, all actions emanate from the karta, which is not separate from aham, I, the atma. The problem comes because the person thinks that he or she is the karta. This thinking, this particular notion, is the only evil there is. If there is such a thing as original sin, it is only in thinking that oneself is the karta, because from this all problems arise. I am the karta is the notion, and it is this notion that binds a person to karma. Why? Because the one who is the enjoyer of the result of action is the one who performed the action. Karta eva bhokta bhavati. When I perform an action, a result accrues, and this result accrues to me, the karta alone. In this way, I am bound by the results of my actions, and thus by the actions themselves. Even a person who makes money and distributes it to all others, leaving none for himself or herself, accrues the result of a good action. People rightly exalt such a person, which is a karma phala that belongs only to the person who distributed the money. But the person is still a karta to whom karma phala accrues, because of which he or she is also an enjoyer. Samsara, the orbit of action and result. I think we'll do this tomorrow. We can stop here and deliberate on this. So there were beautiful explanation given. Karmanyah karmayah paschet, akarmani cha karmayah, sa buddhiman manusheshu, sa yuktah kritsna karma krita. And every word has been so beautifully explained by Swamiji, and Shankara himself has given a huge commentary on this, which is why it has gone into a lot of detail. So unless we understand what karma is and what akarma is, we will not actually understand, we will not even get to jnana. So Swamiji says in the beginning, a person says, I've heard enough of karma, I want jnana. But you can't get jnana unless you understand karma. And for that karma to be done, for any action, there has to be a karta, which is the body, and the instruments, the body, the mind and the senses. For any action to be done, there requires a thought. Like for instance, in the example given, if you want to stand up and walk, 1 second. Huh? I will stop the share here. We can continue discussing this. I will have to go to the hospital. I will request everyone to share their inputs.
Jai Gurudev, can anyone explain that the nature of Atma? It has been told that Atma is unqualified knowledge. Can anyone elaborate this?
I think everyone is in akarta mode now. It's very confusing. I will have to read it again, the whole thing.
Today it's very heavy knowledge.
Very heavy, yes, that's true.
I like it's. I have to read it again, but the nature of Atma is not clear to me. Like it has been said that it is an unqualified knowledge. So if someone has
Jai
Whoever
Gurudev.
is
Yeah, Gurudev says, Atma is very fresh. It never doesn't become stale. That's why he compares with entropy and all here. If a room is closed, even if it is clean, neat, and you lock it and come after an year, you'll find so much of difference even then, right? But in Atma, it never is always free flowing, fresh, always fresh. Bahut taza hai. Constantly Gurudev keeps telling, sunlight, sun is so fresh that way. So, and then that's what I infer. Jai Guru.
But this understanding I got, to do karma, there has to be a karta. So if there is no karta, there is no karma, akarma, karma, or vikarma. What page were we on? And does anyone know?
What did you ask?
What page we were on? Do you remember what page the thing was on? The unqualified knowledge.
It is verse 18, Renal.
Okay.
I don't remember the page, but you can go to verse 18.
Yeah.
We read till samsara, the orbit of action and result. This was the last.
Like Rinal said, I think everybody is in a state of inaction.
Yeah.
Maybe
Because
we can share what we have understood of this verse. Doesn't matter. Whatever our takeaways are, I think it's just by sharing, then it will start getting clearer. Of course, we'll do this verse one more time tomorrow. But there were a lot of concepts that we were exposed to. Of course, we've done the Karya Karana Sanghata before. Like any action requires a thought. And because of a thought, because of the sankalpa, you actually start an action. You do an action. So therefore, Swamiji started off by saying how the karta is required, an agent of action is required. And the karana, which is the body, the mind and the sense complex. So therefore, this body, mind, sense complex is required for any action. And all of this is actually centered on the Atma. If the Atma is not there, then there is not, if there's a dead body, the dead body cannot do any action. So that scintillating consciousness has to be there, upon which action is there. So whether it is action or so-called inaction, inaction is what we say, I'm just sitting still, but that sitting still is also an action. So there is an action in that inaction. And that is what the wise person sees. He also sees inaction in action, because he identifies himself with the Atma, which is the non-doer, and therefore he is just witnessing everything, although he sees. he does not see. In the 5th chapter, I think we learned that Pashyan, Shrinvan, Sprishan, Jigran, Ashnan, Gachan, Swapan, Shwasan. So, although he's doing all of these, he is still not doing anything. Because he identifies himself with the Atma, which is the non-doer. And those beautiful examples that Swamiji gave of Shankaracharya gave of when you're moving and the trees seem like they're moving. So the trees are actually not doing any karma, but we attribute action to the standing still trees. And yeah.
So you mean to say those standing trees were Atma? I mean, compared to Atma, we attribute the action to Atma. Is that the comparison over here?
No, I think that example was given only to say how you see action in inaction. There is actually inaction with respect to, and in the first place, it is not the locative tense that we usually use the term in, that the Swamiji very clearly distinguished. He says all this is with reference to action, with reference to inaction. So with reference to the trees standing still, because you're in the moving train, you assume that the trees are moving. So you're attributing action to the inaction. So you're seeing action in inaction. Isn't it?
Yeah. So with reference to your karma, karana, sangata, it is you are in action, and if you with reference to Atma, it is inaction, right?
Correct, because you're the non-doer. Atma is changeless, is full, is unqualified knowledge. I think unqualified knowledge is that the only knowledge that is there. It does not require any other qualifying statement. I don't remember the exact examples that Swamiji gave for qualifying statements. Like I think Purusha Jnana, he went on to talk of Stri Jnana, Purusha Jnana, what is that, Ghata Jnana, Cloth Jnana. So that is qualifying knowledge. You require some knowledge of any other object in the empirical world. Whereas when you're talking of Atma, it is the absolute. So there's no qualification required. I think that is my understanding of unqualified knowledge. I may be wrong, we'll do this one more time. But for any other thing, the empirical world, you consciousness there. So there's nothing to for the Atma.
Am I the only one who is not able to hear her clearly?
No, I also not able
I
to
think
hear.
she's in the lift now, probably.
Okay.
I think I was in the lift. You continue. We have another 6 minutes, and once at 6:30, maybe Mrinal, you can close. I'm in the hospital now.
Okay.
You can continue. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think everyone's action happening in the mind everyone is trying to
Action in
think.
inaction.
Yeah.
See, inaction
Action in
also,
silence.
inaction also, in the sense when you are sitting quiet also, inside your body things are all working, right? Heart is pumping, kidneys working, liver. That's action is happening. It's not that you're totally inactive. So that is inaction, inaction in action. The action in inaction. Yeah.
There was that story now where they said that Krishna, the gopis came up to Krishna and said that the lake is full of water, there is no pathway left. They had to go and feed an old sage on the other side of the lake. And how do they go about going since the whole place was flooded? So Krishna says, go to the banks and say that if Krishna has never robbed any makhan, butter, white butter, then give way. And they said, how come every day he robs butter from all of us and takes it? And yet he's saying this. But because Krishna said it, they went. And at the banks, they said, if Krishna has never robbed butter, then give way. And the way parted and they could walk through the pathway. They have gone to feed the old sage. And one person, 10 gopis have taken food for 10 people. He eats all that food. He completes eating that entire this thing. And then they say, okay, water is again there fully. So how do we go back? They ask the sage. So saying if the sage has not eaten, then give way. Go to the banks and say it. And again the pathway opens when they say it. So I have not eaten or I have not robbed from the Atma point of view. What was the meaning of that story?
Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing this very appropriate story. I think this actually clinches the whole thing, no? Of this akartra
Yeah.
buddhi,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
non-worship.
That's the beauty of the stories, no? Because you get the meaning so aptly. When we read so many pages, we were struggling to get the gist of what is meant. The story just gives the whole meaning.
All over they call me Kahani Wala Baba. My advanced course is full of stories from the
Yeah, I
Purana.
heard this, Krishna sends food to a sage on the other side of the river, and he tells, tell the river that I am coming from Sada Brahmachari. Then the river will give you a way. Then the lady goes and says, I am coming from Sada Brahmachari, give me way. And the river gives. Sada Brahmachari, Sri Krishna. The lady herself gets confused. Ye kya hai ye? Some 8 official wives and 16,000 wives to whom he has given liberation. But she just asked and the river gave way. And she goes to the sage. I think it was Vishwamitra or I don't know. Then the sage eats the food.
Agastya, Mahan. Agastya.
Okay, Agastya. And return may, she says, I have to go back, sage. While coming, Krishna told me like this, to tell the river and it gives way. Now, what should I say to go back? And he says, Sada Upavasi. I am coming from Sada Upavasi, sage Agastya. Please give me way. Bole to it will give. Bolte. Then the lady say, Are abhi to ye khana khaya? How come he is Upavasi? But she simply says, and the river again gives way and she comes back. So the thing is, Sada Brahmachari. Brahmachari means not the physical, not at the physical level. Many people have this kind of a notion that restricting yourself or forcible abstaining from certain things is brahmachari. No, brahmachari means chari is charan, charinchuta, which is moving around, is chari. Brahma means in knowledge. Brahman means that ultimate knowledge, right? The one who is moving around always within the four precincts, within the boundaries of knowledge, never comes out of that, is brahmachari. So Krishna says, Sada brahmachari, always reveling in knowledge. I am coming from that person, please give me way. Bole to, out of that respect, she gave. The sage is Sada Upavasi. Upavasi is again what we think is fasting physically. Upavasa means Upa is closer, Vasa is staying, being closer. Upavasi means being closer to whom? To that ultimate truth. The saints, sages, they always seek the ultimate truth and they will be always in that sadhana. So he is Sada Upavasi. I am always in that path, closer to that particular ultimate truth. So Sada Upa, I am coming from Sada Upavasi means that kind of a sadhak. So out of that respect, again, the river gave this one. These stories, on one side, they will be interesting. They will help us to remember the things more clearly and give us the actual meaning, what we need to understand in a very, very ordinary and subtle things. Otherwise, really this particular two concepts, reading a great Upanishad and understanding, will be very difficult for common people unless they are high level Sanskrit scholars. So these are all the stories, like even Ramayana, Bharata and Mahabharata, Bhagavata, it was all in lakhs and lakhs of Sanskrit shlokas. The people who have written to us in Sarala Bhasha, in various languages, it helps us understand. This is what is the actual essence of this particular story, as I heard long ago from one of the Swamis. Hari Om.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Persiji and Prem. I think we will wind up here. We'll let this ruminate. Let's ruminate upon this rest of today. And tomorrow we'll redo this and it might help us understand better. We will wind up here. Om Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev. Dhanyavad. Sarvebhyah.
Jai Gurudev.